Okay, let's take a look at vector planes and geometries and having a little fun with them. Just be very playful. Don't worry about too much. Don't get too nervous about anything. You can turn off your turntable, go right into your shaded. Everything's been baked here. It's an interesting geometry, but you have a lot of control. I'm not sure what it is. Some Christmas tree crazy building with a few lofts, a few pipes, and a few geometries. What we have in here, if I take a look, is let's ungroup everything and grab everything, turn it all on visible. So that's what we have. We got the whole shebang. And in doing so, we'll go through it and we'll highlight what we have. I'm not using a cylinder circle, or cylinder sphere, so that's not necessary. So they're there. So let's get rid of those. I am using the cone, but what I do with the cone, turn the preview off, is I quickly find points on it. You can see what we've started to do here, if you can imagine what I'm going to do with those points. I think this is the best way to explain things. Construct a plane on each of those points, rotate it so it's to the normals, and if you don't see the size of those planes, you can always go in the plane size and make it a little bigger. Hit enter, and there you go. You get your 1x1 plane sizes. We don't need to see any of that stuff. Let's turn that off. Let's go into orienting that plane, constructing a plane on it, which I was thinking of using, and I wanted to be able to randomly have an effect of a jitter on how they're moved, and I also wanted to be able to rotate them through 2π or not, which directs an awful lot of geometry. Let's leave it at 2 right now. Kind of explodes. But once again, we don't need to see any of that stuff. Let's turn that off. We have the points on those planes where I've actually dissected the plane coordinates, and I remade a constructed point by swapping the x and y and introducing an amplified range vector from the list length of how many planes were originally there. And if that doesn't make any sense, basically I'm able to jostle and jog a bunch of wonderful things, and the geometry happens to be the surface boxes that I've put to those planes. And they, once again, can be jittered on size and scale in XY, and you can leave it minimum or you can bring it up high, whatever you want. But I'm basically manipulating those faces and getting them all into these positions. So we might want to leave that on. Preview everything else off, and you can see we basically have that one. So we're looking at that big mess of objects, kind of like Christmas presents under a Christmas tree. You have the points, geometries that you can find the centroid to, and you can draw lines between them. So now you have lines that you can technically call out, and I decided to call out by what I was dealing with in this Pathmapper. It's a simple Pathmapper of the points. I didn't end up using the normals. 21 branches with 3 items on each. I swapped the indices with the B path, and that allowed me to script everything in the A, stagger 0, 3, 5, 0, 3, 6, 9, and 1, 5, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And so you're stepping and you're grabbing points through here, and you're bringing them together into points here and points here. And they're hard to see, but when you call them out and grab your lines, if I only looked at your lines, you'd see I'd have these lines that I've actually constructed. Now those lines are piped. The other lines that have been called from the original load of lines, called in the amount of positive points coming out of this split tree, and I just connect things up like a train track. I just love making this stuff. And I put spheres that can arrange in radius. Actually, this count, I changed from the radius of here. I probably made a bigger range count for the spheres. I'm not sure why, but I can play with that. Took everything I wanted and put it in here. And in doing so, that script's online. Well, it's not online yet, but it will be online. Turn it off. You basically have what you want to select, or you can turn on everything that's visible. And now you have some pretty incredible parametric control of what's going on here. So let's jump in and do the first thing. We can always go in and do the UV count less on that, and you end up with just these kind of geometries sitting on the floor doing nothing. And you can also explode them up into a twisted, beautiful Christmas pattern tree. And that's not too spectacular. I mean, it's just kind of playing with it. But major effects on the amount of points that you cut in that cylinder. And then you can also stretch out the radius versus the length. I've got that on a different slider, so it doesn't stay so So if you want something thin and tall, then you can do that. You want something short and fat, you can do that. Now, I haven't thickened these lines or offset these curves, and I may count them up and do that in Rhino, but I do have a very quick script right here. Undo extrude surface normals along normals, and right there extrude. That'll take a nice surface and extrude even if it's oblong or strange. So you can apply that to every single one of these surfaces, and then you can do it in Grasshopper. That said, we've got a very interesting object that we're playing with. We've thinned out. What happens if I play with the rotation on the plane? Just take a look what happens here. It's set to 2 pi, full rotation, but if I start to change that, I end up with some very interesting little geometries, and it's hard to spot those if you set it somewhere between 0 and 2, and you can do snapping at certain numbers if you like, and then take your radius up again. You're going to find you've played with the pattern a little bit on what's being drawn up, and I'm not so interested in it being as even. I don't mind. I like it more Christmas tree-like, I guess. Then I've also got an ability to do a jitter, so no jitter, to actually providing quite a bit of jitter to that. And that's where it gets into some really beautiful geometries. And that's a simple lofted line playing with a jitter node on how you would change those folds. And you'll notice they don't cross over each other. That's a pretty powerful, beautiful thing to do here. And I might take it into artistic so you can see what's happening there. But this is kind of a very intricate, strange, ornamental thing. Once again, I can go in here and I can take my domain and change it, which is, I believe, the domain of the amplitude of what I'm taking into the axis of the rotation of the geometries being the boxes. So this is definitely going to affect the boxes, be it on the amplitude change. You'll see where they start and where they end because of the vectors that are being looked at there. And I actually like those dip down pretty low. And then I've got the ability to start very big and then go very thick, or I can go very thin and extremely thin for the smallest range of what's happening there as the geometries. So I think I'll leave that at very small numbers. I'm pretty happy with that. And let's see if we can get a little variety or jitter happening there. The jitter's set at high. You can set the jitter low, but it's basically just jittering around which objects are thin and which are small. So you kind of play with that and how that's kind of referencing as a geometry top side view and everything. So maybe I'll pull that out so you can see this one and just put that in the zoom extends all, and you can kind of see how that's being affected. So it's a nice little geometry made of pipes, cubes, center boxes, and then you've got ability to divide this up again. So what happens when you do that? Well, you're putting more ornaments on this tree, and you can really blast it and have some fun with that, but I think a minimal amount's all right. I'm starting to crash it out because I went too high. We'll just leave 4 or 6 on there. And then I did use the Pathmapper, which just popped out, and I did some very simple patterns of 0, 3, and we talked about this a little earlier, how I could play with those and change up those numbers, and that will definitely affect the geometries as I go in. So this one's set at 1. I think that's interesting. I have to wonder what happens if I bump that up to 2. It's got to change some of the geometry, and you see the little subtle shift on where things are linking up and touching. I wouldn't want to set it back to 0, but let's just do that and see what happens to that data. It probably disappears because they're probably lines. Nope, they're accentuated from 0 to there. So you've pulled your pipes up a little higher. So it is very playful to understand what you're scripting when it gets into the shift tree, split tree in the Pathmapper, and I'd say start to visualize that. You'll start to memorize how to play with it. The rest is just thickness of pipes and thickness of the spheres. There's all my objects. Take it into a bake. Put it all in there. Wonderful. Didn't take long to bake. Shouldn't take long, even though I did put in a few more things. And it looks like, thank you, Ella's helping me with Dungeons & Dragons. And that's 9 minutes going into 10. We've slowed down a bit of this bake. I may just have, it didn't have that much trouble before. It could be, once again, that I'm set the technical drawing, and it doesn't like that. It really prefers not to be in that render. So here's your awesomeness. You put your blue on there. I don't want to be looking at that. I'll just center it and zoom in and throw it into a slight little above the ground rotation, maybe not that much. Bring it down here and do a simple turntable on it so I can see if I actually like what I do. I'm not much into rendering and in thinking of animations and things like that, so I should have had a bake. It's because I already was on turntable. It was just frozen up. So let's try it again. Yeah, turntable should be fine, but maybe it's just moving. Oh, it was just set to 0. How stupid of me. All right, so there you go. Nice little thing. Spin your little corkscrew in 2 different directions. You got an alternative Christmas tree for this celebration for Xmas. Thanks very much for watching. 10 minutes.